Every decision that we made in this room was made with a purpose. Today I'm going to kind of take you through and explain a little bit of the thinking behind the layout. So as we walk into the classroom over here, you will notice our big IKEA house along with a few little dolls laid out below. Notice how they are laid in different rows. Notice the math that's there. Those are decisions that we made as well, with the hope that that might even lead to some discussion about size, number, and amount. When we Instagrammed a photograph of this house, we already got some feedback from parents that this is something that their children would really enjoy. So we wanted to make sure that it was available for them on the first day. We purposely picked this space because there are 3 open shelves, even though you can see the stuff is laid out now for the meetings on the first day of school. And the hope was with these 3 shelves, we could get the creation of maybe a little bit of a mini world with students feeling like they can extend their play along the shelves and leave things there in order to save. We've also placed our leveled readers here. Sometimes the leveled readers will make their way into other areas of the room. This is something that last year was used primarily with a parent volunteer to do some reading. So it's by the door area in a quiet spot where the parent would often do some of the reading, but also in a quiet spot where children sometimes like to come, kind of cuddle up on their own, be able to face into an empty space. Sometimes the empty space also feels calm for some children, and choose a book that they enjoyed, be it a rhyming one or an alphabet one that was a little bit simpler, to a level text, to maybe even something of some interest to the students. So that was why we kept it in this area. We then move on to this big table. This was a table that really led to a lot of creativity last year. We had a large group of students that really enjoyed Lego play, and often block and Lego play ended up on this table. We found that it is a nice way to introduce some different materials. These are some blocks that will eventually make it probably onto a shelf with other blocks for building and are amazing when used in conjunction with those other building materials, as you can see over there. However, sometimes having a chance to explore them on their own leads to some different kind of creative play, and for children to kind of go a little deeper with some of the ideas. So these happen to be some number blocks. They are great for creating different things. As you can see, we did leave the card here because sometimes children like to see what others have created. It leads to its own kind of reading, even if it's the reading of the pictures. And then the people that sometimes will be used for some stacking options and sometimes will be used in conjunction with the other blocks for some play. We thought that by covering the table with paper and adding markers, which we did a lot last year in addition to the clipboards, it also really lends itself nicely to some drawing, writing, and lots of literacy options. We kept the map on the back wall, largely because there was such an interest last year in using this bulletin board space to create almost like a little mini community. And some of our JKs who are returning to SK really enjoyed that space last year. So we thought that maybe if we left the map there, that may lend itself a little bit to that idea being explored again this year. Let's see what the children do, and if it doesn't have interest, it can always be removed. This table here, while set up for the parent visits and for the parents to fill in some, I should say parent and student visits, to fill in some paperwork, will usually be our eating table. And again, we kind of put it by the door in an area where the children can see the room and see the play that's happening around them, but also have a chance to come and sit and eat. Again, we chose to not have a full class eating time, but have children eat when they're hungry, with the idea of them eating twice. And yes, at first that does take a little bit of adult support, but eventually children are really good. This is a great way for them to self-regulate and realize that when they're hungry, they are able to come down and sit to eat. They pull their lunches onto the shelves over here and can pull them back over to this table, and they pack them up once they've eaten twice. So that's a really good way for them, again, to kind of monitor, and for us to monitor in case some children need some additional support. You'll notice some pillows on the ground. We have them around the room. This was an idea that came from a previous vice principal of mine, Christy Curie Bishop, who mentioned that often in open space, children, especially younger ones, love to run. So it produces a run. So when you put some pillows down, sometime with some books, or in this case, a clipboard for some writing or drawing, it's a great way to promote literacy, but also stop the run and often bring the attention down to something different. Even though for us it seems so far below, imagine for kindergarten kids, they're about half the size. So for them, this is something that they're going to see and something that will draw their attention. Over here we have our block carpet. Having a carpet with the blocks really helps with the sound component. Keeping it away from the place where we often have our meeting time is also great, because then children can save a lot of their structures, which they like. Again, you'll notice that we did not fill all of the shelves completely. And in fact, we have another little mini shelf in between. It is nice to be able to separate the carpet a little bit so that you get a few different areas for the block play and just other kind of creative play. And again, even some of these buckets are empty, some of the shelves are empty. This often leads to the creation of a lot of mini worlds. If children want to save their work but can't necessarily save it on the carpet, the idea of being able to build things into a shelf is a great way to look at some spatial reasoning and lots of problem solving. So again, connecting to our program document. We have some clipboards around, all around the room in all the areas are clipboards, paper, markers, crayons, opportunities for children to write, draw, document, and really add the literacy right into the play. There's also books all around the classroom, and the books really connect to the learning that is happening in those different areas. Students will pull materials freely. It's often as they do that a lot richer learning tends to happen. But these books will often inspire things. So when you see Iggy Peck, architect, or look at that building, students will sit down, they'll have a look, and that might lead to some different structures. Having a little alphabet chart where they can consult to do some writing, and will often even lead to some singing and looking at the alphabet letters, is another way to add in that literacy piece. We've also added the arrow here for measurement. Not only will children likely be interested in measuring themselves, but with the blocks here, they can look at starting to measure the towers and the creations that they make. This is a great way to, again, add that numeracy component and math component in. We also linked it over with the dramatic play space because, again, depending on what they turn the dramatic play space into, this arrow could have another purpose. Last year, we had a student in JK who's going into SK this year who really wanted to create a mall, maybe a West Edmonton mall with some different rides and games might lead to people having to be a certain height in order to play. This, again, could get pretty interesting. Our dramatic play space, which is over here, my teaching partner, Paula, she added the burlap along the ceiling. And the idea was to bring the ceiling down a bit, but often when we do that, we create a calmer space. You'll also notice that the lighting isn't full. We've added in a lamp, which produces some neat little light and shadow in there, kind of a more calming atmosphere. And we're pretty minimalist with what's included here. We do have some dolls, again, which leads to often a lot of dramatic play. We have a little basket with a doll in it, so again, can be used in a creative way. We do have the open cupboard that has a few dishes and cups and plates, and often leads to some subitizing with math as people try to set the table, which you can see here. We've included a phone book with phone numbers, which leads to both reading and to writing, and to math skills as they notice the numbers and can then dial the phone numbers. We've included an agenda here where we can start looking at the calendar and and people adding names and dates and important information to the calendar in a real purposeful setting. And we included a clipboard, so again lends to opportunities for writing, especially in conjunction with the phone book and students writing down the names of their friends. We don't have food in here yet, so it will be interesting to see how the children problem solve with that and possibly use a combination of some loose parts in addition to maybe creating some of their own food. So we really try to add in that problem solving piece. Over here, connected with our dramatic play, which was a change we made last year and actually added to a lot more reading for kids, we have the reading area or the book nook area. Usually you would think you would want this kind of quiet, calming space away, but it actually tends to bring down the volume in the dramatic play and lead to some links between the reading and the drama and even the block play. And the addition of the chairs in the block play also makes people think in terms of the house area, which is where we've started with our dramatic play, and again try to link those areas for a real wonderful flow between the room. We've been very purposeful on the books that we've added out here. We've tried to put some books that students might know a little bit about, some stories they might already know, like The Three Little Pigs, The Very Hungry Caterpillar, some favorite books from last year, a little bit of number books for some number talk, some pattern stories that they can read often based on pictures and clues, some stories of some interest to students. One parent told us that their child loves hockey, so we made sure to bring out a hockey book so they can talk about that, or the Transformers. We have a big, we have a big container of board books, and we purposely have that basket of board books because board books are great for beginning readers with less text on the page, lots of great picture clues. You can really get some great discussion happening and some look at some familiar letters and words. We also added in a binder of some documentation that we had from last year. The idea being that students could look over it, might even inspire some different learning from this year, and students can see themselves and each other and hopefully lead to some great rich discussions, which is wonderful for oral language. Then this leads to our meeting space with the carpet. We purposely picked this meeting space because of the smartboard that's here. While the carpet is empty, and this is something that we talk about a lot during the year, we often invite students to bring some materials over here to sometimes separate the block play that happens over at this carpet, or sometimes we roll out a long sheet of paper on the carpet here, and this can lead to a lot of creative play, writing, drawing, reading, all happening within this carpet space. It can sometimes also be an overflow space for a picnic area for some eating if students do feel really hungry at a particular time. And then over here is more of a sensory writing, drawing area. We have our paint easel, which is often really popular, especially at the beginning of a year. That sensory piece is so important for so many kids. We have the Play-Doh, and we did pick two different colors to start. We chose two colors that when mixed together will still look nice as well, knowing that students will likely do that, but then can experiment with that color piece. We've added the scissors, which is great for developing fine motor skills. We've added the rolling pins, which will allow students to flatten and get a little bit creative, and we added some loose parts to see what students do. Again, you'll see a little bowl with some sticky notes and pencils, with the idea being that we can add that writing component and drawing component that happens here. We also have a writing space over here. We've purposely pulled some books that have some vocabulary words as well as alphabet stuff to maybe inspire some different writing. We have an alphabet chart here for easy access. This book about Fancy Nancy's favorite fancy words came up because last year's we looked a lot at some richer, juicier words, and some students who are now going into SK were incredibly interested in this. So having access to this book easily here may even lead to some different vocabulary development and a chance for students to do some reading right from the very beginning. And over here we have a creative space. We really want to start the year by making this space with the students. For our visits, we did add this tree here with even some of the different beadwork with some letters and words and creativity that students did last year. And we put out just a few beads, again, really with that minimal idea, letting children kind of see what's there, but also be able to clean up, put things away, be aware of their environment and how they use it and get creative with what's there. And the idea being watch and see what they do. And then hopefully what we were thinking for the second day is maybe leave the tree in the middle of the table, but take away the rest. We can always put the beads over on a shelf over here that students can access and give even some SK children, especially a chance to help us form what could we put out on this creative table, what might be of interest to students, and really starting to get them to think in terms of the learning that could happen there and having some ownership over it. We want to make use of our sink space. The sink is at a level for children, and often the sink with that sensory play with the water is really calming for a lot of kids. So a couple of the babies need to be washed. We have them sitting over by the sink. We do have some bubbles and things, and especially on the second day when all the children start, we'll just add a few bubbles and we'll see what the children do. Often this leads to some singing, great conversation or a language, and a really calming, self-regulating kind of space for a large number of students. So we really want to be aware of that and make use of this different space here. And then we have our sensory table, which right now has some sand in it. Again, very simple in terms of what's in it. We really want to see what the students do and how they use these materials. We've purposely picked some measuring cups because we thought that it could lead to some great math talk about the size differences, maybe even a look at some fraction stuff depending on what the different students do. And then we have this little chair that's sitting over here, and we just put down the Sandcastle book. You'll notice that we don't have any signs anywhere telling children or expressing to students what to do or what to create. We really want to see how they use the materials, but at the same time, provide maybe a little provocation, invitation, see what, well, I guess it would be a provocation, see what the students do. And if they happen to link that Sandcastle book to some of the creations in the sand bin, wonderful. And if they don't, then watching what they do and then seeing how we might want to extend it the next day with different materials to add. And then that leads us into our back room here, which is where the hooks are. We tried to leave the SK students from last year in about the same space so they know where they're coming back. The other students, we have the tape out on the hooks to put their names on, but we want to do it with the students on their visit. That way they know where they're going to be. Some students may prefer different areas, and then they will be able to pick and choose and feel comfortable in the space because that comfort piece is so important.